Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we continue to deliberate the various developments regarding the war here in Israel, the Middle East, and beyond, it's always important to highlight that 174 days ago, the Islamist terror groups from the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 134 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Let's now turn to our TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, grant us a little bit of insight into the latest developments, particularly initially on the Gaza Strip, and are we heading towards offensive into the border town of Rafah, irrespective of the objections voiced in Washington?
In one word, no. In two words, not yet. What will happen next month after the diplomatic moves are exhausted, with Prime Minister Netanyahu now again willing to send his own team to Washington to exchange views on Rafah, what will happen regarding the hostage deal, what will happen once Ramadan is over, because what the UN Security Council voted on had to do with the remainder of Ramadan, which is over in less than 2 weeks. All of that, of course, is in the future. For the time being, there is no ceasefire, but one may say that there is a sort of an operational halt in Gaza, as per the IDF maneuvers, because what looks like a halt is actually circling the perimeter in those districts which the IDF has tried to control, such as Khan Yunis in the south, a bit north of Rafah, and of course northern parts of Gaza, such as the Shifa hospital, the medical compound. And once the IDF is encircling the Hamas and Palestinian Jihad terrorists there are engagements, there are firefights, but there is no movement, no progress into other areas. Now, one more important issue, which has to do with the information war. There have been powerful claims, rape and other sexual attacks on Israeli women. One such story was told by the victim herself, Amit Susanna, and earlier today, the IDF spokesperson released an abhorrent confession by one of the terrorists captured by the IDF, in which he admits to raping the woman abducted by Hamas. And as he said, the devil got into me. I don't know why I did it, which is, of course, a very weak excuse. So little by little, the horrors performed by Hamas and the other terrorist organizations are exposed to the world.
All these Hamas minions are minions of the devil indeed, but nonetheless, when we're looking at the broader situation at hand, we understand that indeed there is a certain strategic stop, but also, as my esteemed guests here are quite familiar with the battlefield, when you engage the enemy and conduct a certain maneuver, you stop, canvass your rear, and make sure that whatever you cross through is truly eliminated. And this is the process that is currently undergoing, at least from how I see this. I'd like to add to the discussion the former chief of intelligence at the Mossad, namely Brigadier General in the Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin. It's good to see you, General. When we're looking at the current state of play, Israel had a certain strategy, it devised a strategy, conducted whatever it needed within that context, then entered into a strategic maze, identified the pressure points, and then moved forward to engaging in the next strategy. Are we now following yet another strategic stop into a new maze, or are we there yet? And if so, at what point in time, according to your estimates, are we seeing the next stage, which is seemingly a full-scale offensive into Rafah? Of course, before that, we do expect a certain dialogue to ensue between Jerusalem and Washington on the matter. But are we still expected to see Jerusalem unyield to this demand?
Let me say, first of all, that the biggest problem we are facing is that no strategy was defined regarding what will happen with Gaza when the war is over. And nobody knows to define what is over. That the Prime Minister said that total victory, he uses this term, it's not something that can be touchable. It's not something that can be defined very clearly and understood very perfectly to see what does it mean when he says total victory. Now, total victory will be when Hamas will stop ruling Gaza, and this is not the current situation. Right now, they're controlling Gaza totally, at least part of it. On the military side, meaning, of course, the area of Rafah and the central camps and the area of Deir al-Balah. And on the other hand, on the northern side, there is nobody is really controlling the area. Now, the minute it happens, two things are, we see that two phenomena we are witnessing. The first one is that terrorists are coming back because there is no presence of military units of IDF in this area. They come and go out. And they don't stay there and they don't control the area and they don't demolish these capabilities, but based only on what we call accurate intelligence, they get in and they hit and get out. Now, this cannot, of course, unroot Hamas from the area of northern Gaza, because they're still there, they're hiding in tunnels, in the underground tunnels, and they get out, and they try to hit us, and this is an ongoing effort that will last for, I don't know for how long. Now, the second issue is that we have to go to Rafah anyhow, because otherwise the war is not complete. In Rafah, there are still about 3 or 4 battalions, not the best ones, but nevertheless, they're there, and they pose a threat to the southern part of the kibbutzim surrounding the area of Rafah, and we can't let them stay there without untouched. So we have to go there, regardless what the Americans said. And of course, this is a debate between us and the Americans. We'll have to let go all the refugees out and send them to the area of the Muasi, probably, where they'll be very crowded because there are many people right now. And only then we can begin engaging Rafah, and we'll have to find a way to do it very slowly and very accurate, and it will take a long time.
I'd like to follow up on this with you, General Sofrin. Total victory, I do agree that within context of international law, the laws of war, and the Geneva Convention is unattainable these days. Nevertheless, within the social construct of the Arab street, including the Palestinian street for this matter, if you weaken the Islamist Hamas, the various clans that are the backbone of this terror organization, you are able to bring the other rival clans into the picture and bolster them to the point that they will basically do the rest of the job and take over the Gaza Strip. The question is, what will happen with those clans and whether or not they would pursue a strategy of peace or a strategy of war or resistance in the sake of their Islamic ideologies. Is that a scenario that can be likely implemented in the Gaza Strip at this point, doing so at such a late stage in this campaign?
Jonathan, as you know, Israel tried to speak to some of the leaders of these clans in the northern part of Gaza and to make them create some what we call local administration in certain areas and to control it on the civilian side. Two of them were assassinated by Hamas, delivering a message that nobody speaks to the Israelis and nobody is cooperating with the Israelis. And I'm not sure this is the right solution. Now, since our government declares that they don't want the Palestinian Authority to get into Gaza and to control Gaza on top of Hamas and then to demolish the capabilities of Hamas to rule Gaza, we don't have any other option. So far, nobody's proposed any other solution. We're stuck in the middle. Hamas is controlling the area. Hamas is controlling the convoys that get in with the aid and food and anything else, and taking its own part and then delivering it to the other residents living in Gaza. And nobody can compete them right now. And since we don't have any solution, they are still there, and we didn't succeed in demolishing the capabilities to rule Gaza.
Indeed. Well, unfortunately, I do see the fact that taking away the strategic assets of Hamas from the initial get-go of this war was not executed and was not adopted by decision makers. Unfortunately, this was a blatant failure that now needs to be contended with. But let's now turn to the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish. It's always good to see you. I'd like to ask you, General, when we're talking about the Gaza Strip, but not only the Gaza Strip, looking also in the direction of the northern Israel, Lebanon, where we've seen hostilities once again within the context of an upward trajectory. Are cooperations with the United States in this context still in a focused fashion that allows Israel to potentially escalate in the event of operational necessity?
Well, Jonathan, on the operational level, there is no question, and the answer is yes. The cooperation between Israel and the United States on the military level, let's put it this way, between CENTCOM and the IDF and the different components within the CENTCOM command is as it was in the beginning of this war, and I could mention that even as it was in the last basically 20 years, that the mission of defending Israel mainly against this world of missiles and rockets. This is something that was continuously trained. This is something that the cooperation was evolving, getting stronger, and getting more and being much more effective with the time. And by the way, we saw it during this war. We saw during this war that all kinds of UAVs, cruise missiles that were coming toward Israel were intercepted by the US Navy, and more than once. We saw it in some other areas that we cannot elaborate here, that the cooperation between Israel and the United States brought with it a success in the mission. So in the operational level, and I'm sure that, you know, the background of the question is because we hear all kinds of things happening on the political level and on those areas. But at least at this point in the operational level, this is something that we don't feel. On the contrary, we feel that the cooperation is very tight, is very good, is very open, is evolving every day, and as we know, the war is not done yet. Maybe I would add a note, my own note on what Amir was saying at the beginning. There is no, I wouldn't say that there is a pause or something like this. Maybe there is no news coming out of the Gaza Strip, but as we speak, the IDF soldiers are operating in Khan Yunis, in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, around the Shifa hospitals. They are still there, and there are a lot of operations that are going on. Usually, we hear about them right after things happen, but it is not that the area is quiet. And the other thing that is being done, continuously being done, is the preparation for the next step. So the IDF is preparing himself for the next step. Also, if this war would go beyond what we see today, mainly with Hezbollah in the north, and even it could be even much more than this, the IDF is preparing himself to it. And within the Gaza Strip, we could say that the IDF is preparing himself to the next stage, and we talked about it more than once, that it is obvious that next step should be Rafah, and the only decision that is going to be taken is how. I don't think that the decision of if it's a question. I think the only decision it's really how, and here, of course, there are all kinds of considerations that are part of this decision, including the point of view of our allies.
Indeed. Mr. Owen, when we're looking at the ongoing preparations, particularly for Rafah, as well as the operations currently in the northern, central, and southern Gaza Strip in separate areas, General Gavish, of course, mentioned the ongoing battles in Shifa Hospital, as well as in Khan Yunis, in the Al-Amal area. These operational forces, particularly the commandos and others, are not necessarily in large scale when we need them to be in large scale. And from what at least I hear at this stage, there's already a concerted effort to prepare for a northern war, which may also lead to a multi-sector war. What can you tell us about that?
Well, all you need to know regarding your question is in the unclassified domain. Of course, there are many classified plans and preparations, but for our purposes, it is sufficient that we talk about the unclassified details.
Absolutely.
The IDF, before the war, published its order of battle, and it said that it has 3 or 4 regular divisions or divisional headquarters controlling regular forces. That is, conscripts and career officers with some reserve units complementing them. And they are the 36th Division, the 162nd Division, the 99th Division, which is a new one, and the 98th Division. If you look at Gaza right now, you only hear about 2 of those, the 98th Division in Khan Yunis and the 162nd Division around Shifa and the adjacent parts, the north. All of that means that there are at least 2 divisions now preparing for a northern scenario, for a Lebanese incursion if Hezbollah provokes Israel to go into Lebanon, in addition to the airstrikes, to perform a ground maneuver. Now, these are very heavy forces. They are commanded by some of the best combat leaders that the IDF has, and they have been seasoned by almost 6 months of fighting in Gaza. They are not a force which Hezbollah would be happy to contend with. These are not the forces of October the 7th, which were surprised by the attack and lost their equilibrium for a day or two. This is a totally different picture. And the Northern Command of the IDF has recently conducted a series of briefings and refreshing exercises for battalion commanders and other officers who are assigned duties in the north. Once the order is given, obviously, many parts of Israel will be hit by missiles and rockets. Hopefully, Doron Gavish's subordinates, who are now his peers and colleagues, will intercept many, perhaps most of those, but still the country is going to be hit hard. Nevertheless, the IDF will go north towards the Litani, or perhaps surprise Hezbollah by coming from unexpected directions. And this is waiting for the political echelon to decide.
Indeed. Well, Hezbollah can be certain that the IDF forces are not Jaish al-Islam, and they're not Tahrir al-Sham, and they're not some operatives of the Fatimiyun brigades. They will ultimately have to face the wrath of fully Western operators and commando units that are utilizing methods that are far superior to terror operatives such as Hezbollah. Of course, we will leave the boastfulness aside, since in theory this is the case, and when we'll see it in practice, I mean, to date, they've lost more people on the northern front than what the IDF has lost since the ground operation started in the Gaza Strip, which speaks also volumes. But nonetheless, I'd like to ask General Sofrin on another angle within the equation, and that is Egypt. Since the latter part of October, the Iranian proxy Ansar Allah, namely the Houthis in Yemen, have thwarted much of maritime shipping entering into the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea, of course, the adjacent waterways. This has dire implications on Egypt, which already had economic challenges before this war. How is it contending with it, and what are the implications if this war continues at a time when much of its economic focus was about building in recent years the second Suez Canal, and now both are rendered pretty much empty in compared to what it was before?
First of all, the implications of the Houthis' activities and the fact that they deny merchant vessels to go via the Red Sea to either to Eilat or to via Suez Canal to the Mediterranean Sea has implication on both sides. Eilat port is paralyzed almost for 6 months. They have great losses. Not even one ship is getting into this port. Most of the ports now are, most of the vessels are now going in another route. They are sailing and around Africa and getting to the Mediterranean Sea via Gibraltar Strait, and they go to Haifa. Now, the fact you saw that in the last few days, the management of Eilat port notified that they're going to send home about 50% of the workers because there's no employment, no ships are coming in, and they have huge losses. On the other hand, we have the Suez Canal. Suez Canal was one of the main areas of income for Egypt, and now for the last 6 months, the volume of vessels going through Suez Canal was reduced about in 50%. This caused a huge damage, an economic damage to the Egyptians. They tried to speak to the Yemens, to the Houthis, tried to get to some agreement with them. They wouldn't listen. They applied to Iran. Iran wouldn't listen. They say that they can't control the Houthis. The European Union came to Cairo about 2 weeks ago and brought some charity in a way of almost 8 billion euros to assist the economy of Egypt, since there is a great damage economical damage, I mean, for the Egyptians. And I'm not sure that the Egyptians will last for about a few more months with this damage, and they'll be forced to do something against the Houthis, maybe join the Americans and maybe try to do something else or diplomatic effort, but it won't last that way.
Indeed. And of course, not to forget the port of Aqaba, where a lot has always been diverted. Also from Aqaba, a lot of trucks used to drive up north and go to Syria. Ironically, the supporter or the regime which is supported by the Islamic Republic of Iran. But we have less than 30 seconds left. General Gavish, to what degree are we at a point where the losses of the various attacks by Ansar Allah are going to force a new policy that will bring about the necessary shift?
This is a question that has been already asked for a while. I'm not sure that this is for us to give this answer. But for sure, we saw that there is a shift on the strategy, the overall strategy, from a defensive strategy to offensive one. Now, how strong this would be applied in the ground, it is a question. But I think that at the end of the day, if those attacks would continue, something would have to be done.
Indeed. Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Sofrin, General Gavish, and Mr. Oren for your elaborate insight. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.